Lyara's breathing was ragged as she crouched in the shadows of the wrecked spacecraft, her heart thudding in her chest. Her smooth, iridescent skin flickered between shades of pale blue and deep violet, betraying her rising panic. She had been trained for this battle, strategy, survival, but nothing had prepared her for this moment, standing on the brink of her final hours, trapped on a desolate planet with a human. They were monsters, the humans, savage, relentless creatures who had stormed across the galaxy, conquering worlds, wiping out civilizations without a second thought. She had seen the carnage with her own eyes. Her people, the Zirrek, had fought them for years, but humanity's sheer ferocity and unpredictable tactics had brought them to their knees. And now, one of those very monsters was hunting her. The crash had been unexpected. A brief skirmish between their fleets had ended with both ships spiraling out of control and colliding on this forsaken planet. Her escape pod had malfunctioned, leaving her stranded, alone, well, almost alone. Lyara had seen him, the human, tall, muscular, with his alien features, raw skin, blunt features, and those piercing eyes. She had caught glimpses of him stalking through the jungle, searching for her. His dark uniform, tattered and stained, only added to his imposing presence. "He's going to kill me," Lyara whispered to herself, clutching her energy blade close to her chest. A noisy twig snapping broke her from her thoughts. Her wide, cat-like eyes flicked to the side, and there he was. The human had found her. Frozen in place, she could only stare as he stepped into the dim clearing, his movements slow, deliberate. His gaze was intense, calculating, as if weighing the threat she posed. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the wind rustling the strange alien trees around them. "I don't want to fight you," the human said, his voice rough but calm. Lyara blinked in surprise. Of all the things she had expected, a sneer, a battle cry, a weapon raised in triumph, this was not it. Her grip on the energy blade tightened. "Why, you humans live for this, for death, destruction." Her voice quivered, and she hated how vulnerable she sounded. The human didn't move closer, but his expression softened slightly. "I don't live for death. I've had enough of it." She scoffed, her mind racing. This had to be a trick. They were deceptive, cunning creatures, but something in his tone was different, almost sincere. "I've seen what your kind does," Lyara spat, trying to summon the fire within her. "You destroyed my world. You slaughtered my people." He flinched, and for a brief second, she saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes. That guilt unsettled her more than any weapon could have. "I'm not here to harm you," the human replied. His voice was softer now, almost a whisper. "You're stranded. So am I. We can fight to the death, or we can survive this together." Survive together. The very idea made her stomach turn. How could she trust a creature responsible for the annihilation of entire species? Her people had whispered legends about human beings who felt no pain, no remorse, no empathy. But as she stared at the man before her, she didn't see a legend. She saw a tired soldier, just as broken and lost as she was. "What's your name?" he asked gently, taking another step forward. She hesitated, her instinct screaming at her to run, to fight, but something deeper, some quiet part of her that had long been silenced by the war, urged her to listen. "Lyara," she finally answered, her voice barely audible. "I'm Ethan," the human replied. A long silence stretched between them, filled only with the distant calls of strange alien creatures and the faint hum of their wrecked ships far behind them. Neither moved, but something shifted in the air, a fragile understanding. "What do you want, Ethan?" Lyara asked, her tone weary. Ethan knelt down, setting his weapon aside. "I want to help, if you are willing to let me." Lyara narrowed her eyes. "Help me? Why? What could you possibly gain from this?" Ethan sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "Honestly, I don't know. Maybe I'm just tired of the killing. Maybe I'm tired of watching people, alien or human, die for reasons that no longer make sense." Lyara's gaze faltered. She had expected cold calculation from him, brutality and violence, but this, a human, showing compassion, it made no sense. Her energy blade hummed softly in her hands, its glow casting faint light on the ground. Slowly, cautiously, she deactivated it. "If you try anything, I won't," Ethan promised. Lyara still wasn't sure if she believed him. but exhaustion weighed heavily on her. The adrenaline that had been sustaining her for hours was finally fading, and she felt the full impact of her injuries and fear. She staggered, catching herself against a nearby tree. Ethan was there in an instant, his hands steadying her. She flinched, expecting pain, expecting some hidden blade, but there was nothing, just the firm, reassuring grip of someone offering help. "I've got you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. For the first time in days, Lyara allowed herself to relax, if only a fraction. She leaned into his strength, her body trembling from exhaustion and stress. Her mind was still racing, screaming that this was wrong, that humans couldn't be trusted, but her body, her instincts, told a different story. She felt the warmth of his touch, the steady rise and fall of his breathing, and for the briefest moment, she didn't feel alone. Ethan lowered her to the ground gently, propping her against the tree. His hands were careful, considerate, as he began tending to the wounds she hadn't even realized she had. His touch was strangling, but it wasn't unpleasant. In fact, it was comforting. Lyara closed her eyes, her mind spinning. She had feared this human, expected him to kill her without hesitation, but instead, he was offering something far more dangerous: kindness. Lyara awoke to the gentle rustling of leaves overhead. For a moment, she forgot where she was, forgot the war, the crash, and the human. But as her senses returned, so did the reality of her situation. Her body ached, the aftermath of injuries and exhaustion, but there was a strange calmness within her. Ethan sat nearby, stoking a small fire, his eyes, distant and focused on the flames, looked tired. She watched him for a while, half expecting him to attack her the moment she stirred, but he didn't. He simply sat there, lost in thought, as if trying to figure out something far beyond their current predicament. She shifted slightly, and Ethan turned to her, his expression soft but guarded. "You're awake." Lyara sat her up slowly, wincing as the dull pain in her side fled. "How long?" "Not long. A few hours." He nodded toward a canister beside her. "I found some water nearby. You should drink." She eyed him warily, but her thirst overpowered her suspicion. Taking the canister, she drank, the cool liquid soothing her parched throat. It was strange how this small act of kindness, something as simple as offering water, could feel like the greatest betrayal of everything she had been taught. "You're still here," Lyara muttered, lowering the canister. She hadn't expected him to stick around. Ethan shrugged, leaning back against a rock. "Where else would I go?" "Back to your people," she said. Though she already knew the answer, they were as stranded as she was, both of them cut off from their worlds, from their armies. Still, it felt strange to acknowledge it. "No one's coming," Ethan replied, his tone bleak, "at least not anytime soon." Lyara's eyes scanned the sky, the horizon, searching for any sign of her people, but there was nothing. Only the eerie quiet of this unfamiliar planet. No ships, no rescue, just her and the human. "You still don't trust me," Ethan said after a moment, his voice thoughtful. Lyara snapped her gaze to him, unsure how to respond. Of course, she didn't trust him. How could she? Humans were killers, destroyers. But hadn't he already shown her more compassion than any of her own people would have in this situation? "It's not that," she replied, though she wasn't even sure what she meant. "It's just difficult to believe." Ethan let out a soft chuckle, one without humor. "I don't blame you. After everything that's happened, I wouldn't trust me either." Silence fell between them again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy, laden with the weight of things unsaid. Lyara didn't know what to make of him. He wasn't like the stories, wasn't like the ruthless human commanders her people had fought. But then again, this wasn't a battlefield anymore. "Why are you different?" she asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. Ethan looked at her, and for a long moment, he said nothing. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows across his face, highlighting the tired lines around his eyes. "I used to be like them," he said finally, his voice low. "I used to believe that fighting, winning, was all that mattered, that if we just conquered enough, destroyed enough, we could somehow secure peace." He shook his head. "But it never ends. There's always more death, more blood." Lyara's chest tightened at his words. She understood all too well. Her own people had fought for survival, for dominance, and in the process, they had become the very thing they despised, and now, here she was, sharing this strange peace with the enemy. "What changed?" she asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Ethan hesitated, then sighed. I lost people, friends, family, good soldiers, people who didn't deserve to die. And for what? Another planet, another war. His gaze drifted to the stars above. I realized I was just as trapped as you were, as everyone is. Lyara felt a strange pang of sympathy for him, something she hadn't expected. Could it be possible that they weren't so different after all? That maybe, in this vast, violent galaxy, they were both just casualties of a conflict neither had ever truly wanted. We've all lost, she whispered, more to herself than to him. Her thoughts turned to her family, her home, everything she had fought to protect, now gone, wiped away in the endless cycle of war. Ethan nodded, his expression somber. Yeah, we have. For a while, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled softly, and the cool night air settled around them. Lyara found herself relaxing, her guard slipping despite the danger she knew still lurked. There was something strangely comforting about this fragile truce between them. Do you think it's possible, Lyara asked, breaking the silence, for this to stop, for the war to end? Ethan looked at her, and for the first time since they had met, there was a flicker of hope in his eyes. I don't know, he said honestly, but I think, maybe, if more people started seeing things the way we do, there's a chance. Lyara wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that this strange peace between them could be a reflection of something larger, a hope for a future where their people could coexist. But deep down, she knew the reality of their situation. Peace was fragile. It could shatter in an instant. Still, for tonight, it was enough. As the fire burned low and the stars wheeled overhead, Lyara allowed herself to close her eyes, resting against the tree. The human, Ethan, remained close, his presence a quiet reassurance in the darkness. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, whether they would be enemies once more, or whether this fragile alliance could survive. But for now, in this moment, she didn't fear him.